Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Senator McCain when he said that it's refreshing to get a very succinct presentation, breaking it out, Iran, Iraq, Syria, and you have certainly done that, and I appreciate it very much. One thing we haven't talked about very much is the refugee situation, and it's been our feeling, or at least my feeling for a long time, that until such time as we develop a strategy in the Middle East, it's going to be very difficult to address this. It's also, as you pointed out, it become more severe if we don't. In January, General Mattis testified before this group. He said, quote, "We have many potential allies around the world in the Middle East who have rallied to us, but we have not been clear about where we stand in defining or dealing with the growing violent jihadist terrorist threat." He's saying the same thing. We don't have a specific strategy there. Dr. Kissinger stated before this committee, "The role of the United States is indispensable. It's time for a global upheaval, and the consequences of American disengagement magnifies and requires larger intervention later." First of all, I ask if you agree with these assessments.
I do, yes.
You know, I'm embarrassed to say that if we have a strategy in the Middle East and dealing with specifically these countries and others, I don't know what it is, because we've been waiting for that strategy, and it seems to me that you're not going to resolve the refugee problem. It's a very real one. Here we are expanding the numbers that we would be willing to accept, and it's just a drop in the bucket when you look at 4 million that are out there, plus another 8 million that have been displaced are still in Syria. So until that time, I don't think it's going to resolve the problem. Would you have a specific explanation of the strategy of the administration in the Middle East, affecting the whole Middle East, along with the Syria, Iraq, and Iran? Do you know what that is?
I'll defer to the administration for that.
Well, I've been deferring to the administration of that also, and we still don't have it. You mentioned Ukraine. I know this is supposed to be the Middle East subject, but I happened to be there right after the Ukrainian elections with Poroshenko, with Yatsenyuk, the prime minister, and how proud they were and how committed they were to us. That they, for the first time in 96 years, don't have one communist in their parliament. And then immediately, of course, Putin started invading, sending troops in, sending equipment in, very similar to what's happening in Syria. Now, you did respond to what they're trying to, I guess, do with their military buildup in Syria. Is there anything you would like to add to that in terms of what their end game is, what they're trying to accomplish with that?
Let me go back to Ukraine, if I could, actually, because I think what Putin wants in Ukraine is to ensure that Ukraine does not succeed. His worst nightmare would be a thriving, vibrant, prosperous democracy with free market economy on his western border. He knows he can look at Poland and see what happened in the 20 years since Poland and Ukraine had roughly the same per capita GDP. Poland is twice as much now. Ukraine is still mired where they were. So he's going to do everything he can, not only now that the conflict seems to be freezing, to keep it bubbling, but what he really wants to do is, again, ensure that there is failure in Ukraine. And in that regard, the future of Ukraine is going to be determined in Kiev, not out in the Donbass. Yeah. There are concerns about political infighting and so forth. And the Ukrainian leaders have got to pull together and get the politics right, just the way, by the way, Iraqi leaders have got to pull together, because the center of gravity, as I mentioned, of the fight in Iraq is actually not on the front lines. As important as fighting on the front lines is and pushing back ISIS and out of Ramadi and out of Mosul and so forth, the future of Iraq is going to be determined by politics in Baghdad. And as I mentioned, we have a unique opportunity right now to support the Prime Minister of Baghdad, who is a year into the job pursuing very aggressive reforms. He's done away with the vice presidencies, the deputy prime ministers, 8 ministries, and is now asking for examination of the activities of the Chief Justice, somebody who was actually a solid, reasonable Chief Justice during the surge and a few years after that, but then increasingly became used, I think is an accurate description, by Prime Minister Maliki to go after the senior Sunni Arab politicians and to support other activities that ultimately alienated the Sunni population and undid what we achieved during the surge.
Well, General Petraeus, my time has expired, but here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to have you answer for the record. I go back to Oklahoma and I talk to people, and they contend, and I do too, that we're overcomplicating this deal that we have proposed with Iran, and that you don't really need to go beyond the fact that, as our Ronald Reagan used to say, verification is important. I don't think verification is there, so I'd like to have you analyze just that part of this proposed deal. If we have something that can go as long as 54 days before going in to find out whether or not Iran is developing some of the things that we think they are, I'd like to know how that is verification plays into this, if you do that for me.
Sure.
Thank you.